So you go down this cliff, go left down the cliff, left, and then just tumble for a while, and then you should be there.
It's society. They work for each other. They pay each other. They buy houses. They get married, make children. That just sounds like slavery with extra steps.
I don't know if you've noticed, but our two-party system is a bowl of looking in the mirror at itself.
I can't wait for the episode of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, where all the contestants team up and they overpower the host and they share the money.
The message of Occupy Wall Street is I would prefer not to play the existing game.
We are a socialist party and there are social solutions to the problems.
Communal lifestyles, I don't know about that.
No one can tell me what to do.
Wow, you're a real anarchist.
Didn't know we had a king. I thought we were an autonomous collective.
No words for you puppets of the West. Communism forever.
God, those communists are amazing.
Okay, welcome to the Three Left Show. I am your host, Dan Platt. This program covers issues, opinions, and anything of interest from a radical and revolutionary left perspective for the curious or the committed, promoting a post-capitalist present and future via direct democracy and a commons economy. It discusses the means and ends of a multi-tendency left that is of itself and for itself, using socialism, anarchism, and ecological perspectives in theory and policy. So these are the flags of the three lefts. I bid you welcome to the leftist reading hours. And I have a special guest, the Mayhem Calling. Introduce yourself, please.
Hi, everyone. I am T-misanthrope of the Mayhem Calling. We are a monthly podcast / YouTube channel / hopefully soon to be a full-on activist organization. I am still working on the details of that, but yeah, we cover things from a leftist perspective, mostly focused on activism or on education. I am also a pro-union / anti-work activist. So hopefully I provide some fun quips and some interesting talking points, or, just some fun reactions when we go about our subject today.
Yeah. So Mayhem Calling, or Misanthrope, was another fellow panelist on the leftist panel. We did two on the leftist, I'll just call them leftist panels. And and he's been doing various other panelists on his show, like Fraggle was another one who just kind of mostly focuses on police reform. And I, since in our panel discussion focused on the Green Party, I was just on his show to discuss Green Party politics and go through all the standard arguments that I've done on the show at least 5 times over. What I decided to do with T today is to actually do the Parecon episode that I've been itching to do for, the whole time I've had this show, I suppose, because it was before this show that I'm a big fan of Parecon, which is a economic model created by some heady academics. And I even made my own PowerPoint presentation and talk to go with it, to give it, local TEDx forum or whatever. And but I've yet to think I have actually yet to actually give that talk. I made a kind of Occupy Wall Street talk that I gave at least twice, and I think and because I weave in participatory government or direct democracy into that talk, so like my Occupy talk would slowly turn into a direct democracy talk. And the last time I gave that was to a group of science nerds who just couldn't wrap their head around deliberative democracy, I guess, because they just don't trust anybody. I don't know. And but it was an interesting time. And slowly I kind of wanted to do Parecon talks. But by the time that I put it all together, I was starting to be interested in the podcasting side or making media. So I'm like, okay, I'll turn my talk into a set of videos. Didn't really get into that because I didn't actually have video skills. And then that just kind of stayed on the back burner. And then I started running for office, being green, all the other types of community projects. It just, giving the talk or time banking came up, and that became something that I could give a talk on. Participatory budgeting, things that didn't take an hour to explain. But after some digging, I found an article summarizing Parecon that actually isn't that long. Because otherwise, whether it's on YouTube or in book form, it takes a while to explain, but it really shouldn't take that long to kind of say the main three things about it, which is that the problem with most political ideologies is that they still maintain class divisions, and that we need to put effort into identifying what causes class divisions. Some ideologies already have an answer for this, but they've been, over historical terms, over the last 100 years, wrong. Let's say, socialists say capitalists, if you take away the capitalists, then we can start moving towards classlessness. Socialist states bear that out as not being the case. Other types of anarchists say it's just these government hierarchies, but you remove them, and then you still have social and identity and hierarchies based on types of work people do. That's what it kind of gets into. So I'm going to start with this article from a article posted by New Unionism, to track down a link so that you could read it yourself, dear audience. But at the moment, I have the date that it was published towards the end of 2012, almost a decade ago. But it's called Global Unionism, the Parecon Model. So New Unionism is the author's name, so I guess it was a site or something.
Gotcha.
So I'm starting the reading. So in a speech given at the Global Labor Institute Summer School in Manchester earlier this year, lifelong trade unionist Dan Gallion stated, "The need of the hour is a serious challenge to global transnational capital and to world order it has fashioned. Such a challenge cannot be mounted unless the movement recovers a common identity based on an alternative vision of society." Being left-wing in the 20th century meant that vision was the Soviet Union or whatever. And with anarchists, that alternative vision is the Zapatistas or Rojava. But we're not united around that. It's not a common vision for society. So he added, "Our movement is in deep crisis, a twofold crisis," and he was referring to a labor movement, "a crisis of the trade union movement and a crisis of socialism. And we should be aware that these are related. So much that it is impossible to deal with them separately." So the writer says, "Here I think Gallen is spot on. The reason organized labor cannot mount a serious challenge to global capitalism is due to a crisis of socialism, which has had an inevitable weakening impact on the international trade union movement. It therefore follows that in order to overcome a crisis in unionism, we first need to address this crisis of socialism, like particularly how we define it for the 21st century."
Yeah, that's actually something I did mention. Like, I think we talked about it a little bit when we were talking about unions on my podcast, which I don't know when people are going to listen to this, but it's either going to be after or before this episode. So, but yeah, like, it's absolutely true. Like, there is a element of socialism. There's an element of, organizing within the community that you have to do before you can even think about, like, any other aspect of it. And the best way to do any sort of organization is through, at the very least, a socialist mini-government, a socialist idea of everyone comes together, we all have an equal vote, we all have an equal say, and we all have an equal part to play.
This comes in the form of the General Assembly, in a government form, and economically as like a mutual aid collective.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think when mutual aid collectives, I made this comment in my show, I'll repeat it again, or last week's show, but I'll repeat it again, that until like the mutual aid collective starts making pasta and other kind of goods that are bought in a store, like things that are actually manufactured, we're not going to be able to bite the hand that feeds us. Or we can't really break free from the market economy. We can't say no. No is powerful, and we need to say no to the system. But we can't just keep dumpster diving for what we eat or the power we get or the basics of our lives unless we're really prepared to cut back and go primitivist or something like it, something that's halfway there. So, drawing on the work of Michael Albert and Robin Handel, I will briefly explain why I think socialism is in crisis. I will also propose an alternative economic vision to that socialism. By the way, the crisis is referring to is the fact that the Cold War ended and capitalism, quote unquote, won. That there's no united version of socialism, that you have social democrats, you have democratic socialists, you have kind of social anarchists, and you have labor unionists still, but there's no socialist movement, so to speak. Or if there is one, it's very disjointed because it's a lot of different tendencies and strategies for getting power or what the goals are for that movement.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of it's harm reduction, and fighting for social and having a socialism means you're not just reducing harm. So finally, I will describe how this new economic vision could be used to inform global unionism, presented here as an alternative to the current international trade union movement as a means of organizing the desperately needed challenge to the current insane system of capitalism, capitalist destruction and greed. First, a word on the binary of capitalism and socialism. So economics is about production, consumption, allocation of goods and services. Under capitalism, the economy is privately owned by and run in, thus, the interests of a very small minority, typically referred to as capitalists, capitalist class. Socialism, on the other hand, is meant to be a very different one. So this is just setting terms. One in which there are no private owners and where the economy functions in the interests of a common good. Whereas capitalism generates private tyrannies, socialism is meant to foster economic democracy, where workers and consumers have control. However, as we know, things did not work out that way in the 20th century. What went wrong? First is a matter of class consciousness. Central to the analysis presented here, why there's a crisis of socialism, is class consciousness. Looking back at the so-called socialist societies during the 20th century, it now seems clear that the workers and consumers were not in control of the economy. However, it also seems clear that there was no capitalist owners either. So if the working class and capitalists were not in control, who was? So the answer offered by Albert and Handel is what they call the coordinator class. Sometimes in American, like in our language, we use professional managerial class, but it's slightly different, if not just more accurate, to call them coordinators. So their definition is planners, administrators, technocrats, and other conceptual workers who monopolize the information and decision-making authority needed to determine outcomes. So an intermediate class in capitalism is their role. In the Soviet Union and China and Yugoslavia, they were the ruling class. Otherwise, the PMC or coordinators are the middle class, like in America.
Right.
So from this, we can see that, so in a way, the Soviet Union was a little closer because it cut out the capitalists and you just had coordinators and workers. So it was two classes instead of three, but still a hierarchy. So from this, we can see that what we've conventionally seen as socialist economies, but by those on the left and right, are understood by Albert and Handel as coordinator economies, not socialist ones. So a coordinator economy being an economy in which a class of experts, managers, and conceptual workers monopolize decision-making authority while traditional workers carry out orders. So apologists for smashing the Soviets and centralization of power by the coordinator class during the Russian Revolution typically highlight external factors like the Civil War. Trotskyists. Yeah. However, as Albert and Handel point out, such accounts fail to take into consideration the fact that Trotsky himself stated, I consider that if the Civil War had not plundered our economic organs of all that was strongest, most independent, most endowed with initiative, we should undoubtedly have entered the path of one-man management much sooner and much less painfully. And this could be amazingly out of context, but whatever.
Oh, yeah.
So from this candid expression of coordinator class desires for control, we can safely conclude that if Trotsky, instead of Stalin, had followed Lenin as their leader, we would still not have had worker and consumer control of the economy. We would not have had classlessness, and given the influence of such figures, I think we can draw some of a conclusion regarding any kind of 20th century socialism. I think I wanted to add to that paragraph that there's maybe an acceptance that to modernize, to industrialize, there needs to be this hierarchy, this domination of coordinators. But I think Gandhiism was all about that communities can self-manage their own industrialization. But it's odd that, modernizing kind of does entail a certain amount of specialization, like it requires it. And specializing means you're coordinating or that. But I wouldn't put it as inevitable. I think it's just the way it happened. And I think the counter, from an anarchist point of view, is that if we're all the transition, that we're all kind of being educated the same amount, and we don't need these coordinators to make decisions over others. Any responses to that stuff?
Yeah, actually, so mostly I just want to focus on that. Yeah, obviously the most basic texts, and I know everyone's probably going to cover this, like the Conquest of Bread, Das Kapital, all that stuff. But going outside of that, you can also see a lot of that coming from I think one of the best examples I have in town is that we do have co-ops and everything like that, which, kind of follow along that path, but a lot of them are still fairly corporate, as weird as that sounds. But
it's not weird. This is actually what Albert and Handel kind of get at.
Yeah.
In that a 21st century socialism isn't really a co-op strategy. I mean, co-ops have a part in transitioning to it, but they're not the end. They're not actually democratizing, because as this goes on, and as my writing goes on to summarize the whole book, that I'm still maintaining class relations as long as there's a corporate division of labor.
No, absolutely.
So that's the phrasing they use, actually. That co-ops, even in democratic decision making, are still replicating that division of labor. I'll explore why by continuing. So essential to understanding the demise of working class support for socialism then is this coordinator class consciousness, which I guess trickles down, which is individualism incarnate to me. If you have too much individualism, everything just kind of becomes what's good for me, or what am I doing about this, instead of a collective action. So without it is impossible to understand the twofold crisis highlighted by Galen. Once we develop coordinator class consciousness, it is possible to begin to address this crisis by identifying the source of coordinator class power, but recognizing that this class actually exists, and that what we can. It's not just these professional managerial types, that there actually are a class with their own interests in a way, and that's what makes up most Democrats.
Right. No, I wanted to respond to that, but I also want to continue my point that I was making earlier. I think the best example we have in town, where I live in Tucson, which, by the way, I'm not in Albany, so if anyone's wondering why I'm not referring to things locally, that's why.
Yeah.
In town, we have a couple of unnamed. I say unnamed. They probably have an internal name, but they don't have any official name. We have some unofficial organizational groups where they go out and they actually do, like you were talking earlier, how the mutual aid funds, if they're not creating pasta, or they're not creating things that we would buy at the store, they actually do that stuff. And they have food licenses and everything. They basically take donations for all the stuff to make the stuff. They take donations to bake. They take donations to cook.
Well, Food Not Bombs chapters do. I mean, they do. A lot of them do their own cooking.
Yeah,
as well. It's just that usually we do it with salvaged food, but we also, of course, take donations too.
Yeah.
So
this one's not affiliated with Food Not Bombs. This is exclusively a collective of people who they got together.
Just a collective that they don't name themselves, because I guess once you name something, it's that's a Western chauvinist way of controlling it.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, they're a bunch of old hippie anarchists, so they.
Okay, they're older. Okay.
Yeah, they don't want to get involved with all that, but they do.
Well, that makes sense. The older the hippie, the more they actually want to. They were traumatized by the Red Scare and the Cold War. I mean, they don't want to be identified as being some radical anti-capitalist group.
No, exactly. They go around. Mostly, what they do is they do homeless activism, because they themselves were at some point or another homeless.
Yeah.
So they have that's their mutual aid, is they do that. They take donations. They generally don't take cash donations unless you say, hey, I don't have any of the supplies, but here, if you want to go buy some. They do that because they don't take cash donations, because then because they are an organization of sorts, even if they don't have an official title.
Sure.
There's ways that taxes can get back to you and all that stuff. But if they can just write it off saying, no, I just use it to buy groceries, then, that's fine. But once you start...
Food Not Bombs chapters, so they're named, but they are, as long as you remain unaffiliated, you don't incorporate, you don't do anything that a organization would do, like rent property or something, then, you can stay unaffiliated, which gives you that freedom.
Yeah.
And still have a name, but I guess they don't feel like they need one. But in Albany, we had the Homeless Action Committee, which probably did all of this. And eventually they bought a building, and they have a building. And their main service is to have a van where they drive around, and they kind of have a route of every person who's homeless, because they have their usual spot, and they basically drop off care stuff for them.
Yeah.
So they go to where the homeless are. They don't force the homeless to go to some place to pick up, water.
No, absolutely. And that's the hardest thing for a lot of homeless people too, is because on top of, just transportation issues and all that stuff.
Yeah, let's not I don't want to digress too much.
No, yeah. But I just
because we could go on forever about homelessness.
Oh yeah, no, I just wanted to mention that that's the closest we got to a socialized way of doing things, not focused on the corporate, the capitalist.
I gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, mutual aid collectives are close. Okay, so once we develop the coordinator class consciousness, it's possible we begin to address this crisis by identifying its source of power and developing a vision for an alternative economy that removes that power source. Something that no socialist enterprise really does, though I believe kind of libertarian municipalism, what they do in Rojava or in the Zapatista zone, they have kind of worked out that it's pretty horizontal. But anyway, this is exactly what Albert and Handel have done in their development of the participatory economic model, mostly shortened to Parecon, which is offered as a vision for a classless and sustainable alternative to both capitalism and the 20th century socialism that they call coordinatorism. But before moving on to describe and discuss it overall, how could it inform global unionism, I first need to briefly explain the power source of the coordinator class, which is, as they call it, the corporate division of labor. Many people, especially those from a Marxist background, so this is like Albert and Handel, they don't call themselves Marxists, but they're definitely they're trained Marxists. But they've changed the terms. I think they've moved, they're post-Marxists, I guess you can call them, without being but not being anti-Marxist.
Right.
So it seems to confuse the idea of, but those of a Marxist background confuse the idea of coordinator class being the same as the middle class or the petty bourgeois or that of bureaucracy. This is a mistake that most likely results from the limitations of a Marxist framework. First, there's the notion of the middle class. Really, it says nothing about anything, which is not the case with the concept of coordinator class. So whenever any Democrat says, don't you hate it, misanthrope, when you hear a Democrat or even progressive talk of saving the middle class and not workers?
Yeah, I do.
They don't mention working class at all.
Nope.
They just say the middle class. We got to save the middle class. I think even Bernie did this to some extent, didn't he?
Well, I think that comes from a misunderstanding of the working class anymore and the middle class. They think that the middle class is still the working class, which it's not. The middle class is
yeah.
I wouldn't say that none of them are working class. I'm sure there's plenty of them.
Well, they're all workers, and that's the point of we are in the 99%, that they're still wage slaves.
Yeah, exactly.
That was the point of that slogan.
Yeah.
I covered that in my class last month. But anyway.
But I think that's...
So regarding the petty bourgeois, like capitalists, they derive their economic power via private ownership. Think, homeowners associations. After this is not the case with coordinator class, though. As for the bureaucracy, it is not clear exactly what is meant by this, but but the concept is not usually presented to mean a group of economic actors with their own class interests, as in the case with the coordinator class. Though people do talk of the bureaucracy as being like this institution with its own interests. Something to think about. So as always suggested above, the coordinator class derives its power, not from ownership, but instead by their monopoly on empowering tasks within the economy, information control. So the question becomes, what economic institution allows this monopoly to occur? The answer offered by Albert and Handel is the corporate division of labor. So the division of labor, corporate one, results from a specific formulation of jobs in which some are made up of tasks that are more empowering than others. For example, think of a hospital where you have workers that clean all day and those that do surgery. Although I think they're both doing basically a repetitive task or a task. So I would actually replace the surgeon with the administrator that gets paid 3 times more than the surgeon.
Right.
So this uneven formulation of jobs creates a corporate division of labor, which in turn allows the coordinator class to monopolize their empowering tasks within the economy. From this analysis, we can see that if we want to move beyond the class system and towards a meaningful economic democracy, we must not only reject and replace private ownership, which is just communism, overall, but also the corporate division of labor. That otherwise we would be moving towards kind of the Leninist Marxist state, and nobody in America is really a statist. I mean, there are some, but it's more like state is a tool to collectivize, or to make the commons. So this, along with other additional institutional proposals for a classless economy, is what Parecon offers. So participatory economics goes like so. So now that we understand this root cause of a socialist crisis, or at least one of the things, we can see that we want classlessness. That's kind of goal number 1 there. Right. We need not only an alternative to private ownership, which would be some form of commons, but also an alternative to the corporate division of labor, which is what Parecon focuses on. It kind of takes it as a granted that the economy has been put in a commons. I want to say that outright. So I think any kind of mass movement where we're taking power, doing a revolution, and we're making the economy a commons, this is kind of the thing you do regarding labor policy. Like, now that you have the commons, how do we do work without replicating hierarchy?
Right.
Without it just being a mess of collectives using markets, which is where you get market anarchism. And I'm like, but markets create hierarchy of buying power, or something else like that. So it's made up of 1, 2, 3. Okay, they give 4 parts, but it's more like 5, with the first one being the commons.
Right.
But here's the 4 that are kind of new. So the first is worker and consumer councils that are self-managed. So as an alternative to private ownership and the tyranny that accompanies this, the Parecon model proposes self-managed worker and consumer councils, sort of council communism, as sort of called, but this is different. But it's the same tool. In a Parecon, everyone belongs to a worker or a consumer council, which they self-manage. Self-management is a principle that guides decision-making within the councils and defines as follows: that people have a say in decisions in proportion to how much the outcome of that decision impacts that, which is one of those things I repeat over and over when it comes to like describing direct democracy to people. Like, oh, we all can't have the same say because some people know more than others, or some things don't affect you. I'm like, exactly. It doesn't. They have a proportional say. So if it impacts you 100 times more than Trump or down the street, then you will have 100 times more votes or more say. I think the metaphor used by Michael Albert, which I liked, was you're at a job and you have a radio on your desk. Your radio, the music you play, can be heard by everyone in the room. And so everyone should have an equal say in what music you're playing because it affects them. If it's the picture on your desk and only you can see it and it only affects you what picture is there, then that's a decision that you have. I mean, that you have proportional power over that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay, so following this so far, part one is worker councils, which can be like co-ops or collectives, and consumer council, which is the same thing but consumers. And there are such things as consumer unions that can sue companies when things go wrong or when a product is dangerous, or and it would be interesting to have consumer councils, consumer unions, which we don't really have strong ones in America, though I think there is one, but I've never heard of them. Right? They're not like, they don't have a presence in our consciousness.
They're like the lawyers and stuff that kind of like get together and say, okay, well, and like I think that's why they get a lot of like the heat as ambulance chasers, because the consumer unions are like, well, this product's bad, we want to protect our consumers, and then like of course the corporation's going to be like, oh well, they just want the money, which of course everyone wants money, but that's not the point.
I think consumer unions are like advocacy groups because they're funded by God who knows where, foundations, I guess, but they're not due paying organizations, so they don't have the money to fight corporate megacorps.
No, not by themselves.
Like they can do advocacy. They can kind of fight for a ban on microplastics and lipstick.
Like I've seen them.
They can't fight effectively for a right to repair in phones.
No, definitely the right to repair stuff. That's a whole different subject. But like I've seen a couple.
But something a consumer union would like fight for would be their number one issue.
Oh yeah, I was reading about a consumer union actually, and they do. If something is bad enough, like when the dang Rockin' Plays were causing like those child deaths, I know that like it was a consumer union that got the lawyers to get in there and basically force a recall.
I see.
Yeah, so there's
now
some
in
like,
this context, yeah,
there is.
Now
some,
in this
like,
context, a consumer union is actually like how a union is mostly for producers.
Right.
It's not really to keep the producers accountable. It's actually to do the consumption.
Gotcha.
So a consumer council is your actual like local retail coalition.
Gotcha.
So
that makes sense.
To flesh it out in the second half, which is upcoming, I suppose, but they run the stores. Like they're like in the utopian things, or it's usually an alien invasion movie, like The Host, where it's just like the store is just store and like everything's on the shelf and you can just walk in and take whatever you need. Like that's a consumer council. So anyway, next the second one is kind of the important one for the next two are based on like breaking the corporate division of labor. So the next one is balanced job complex. So as an alternative to the corporate division of labor, the Parecon model offers the balanced job complex, a BGC. I haven't used that acronym, but whatever. So in a Parecon, everyone has a job, or for the most part, or needs or wants one. And everybody's job is made up of an equal balance of empowering and desirable tasks. This, so the balance of empowering and the disempowering. So the whole, and this comes up like, I think this is something that Destiny would harp about when going through his debating leftist arc.
Yeah.
Of like, you can't have workplace management or economic democracy. Who will do the chores? Who will take out the trash or something like that? Or like the janitor can't make decisions for the office. Right. So everyone in the office does a little bit of the janitorial duties. Just like a classroom where, well, this isn't always the case, but like, in a old-timey classroom where each of the students does one of the chores.
Right.
At the end of the day, and it takes 10 minutes to basically clean everything instead of one person an hour.
I look at it as like living with people too, because like everyone in the house, it's like, okay, someone's got to do the dishes. If I do it now, you're going to do it tomorrow, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of like everyone does a little bit. Everyone just contributes, even if it's not necessarily the most fun job. We all have.
No one feels put upon. No one's put upon to do more than another.
Exactly.
So it's there's obviously backlashes of, you can't have a surgeon doing cleanup duty Because he could be doing more surgeons. Well, we're talking about an economy with a commons where everyone's getting a college education or something close to it or equivalent. We're going to have more surgeons because right now we have a cap on surgeons.
Right.
Capitalism puts a cap on professionals, the amount of people who can have them and be paid well and whatever. So without all of these capitalistic nuances, I suppose, a lot of these issues go away or whatever. So anyway.
Yeah.
So this, it should be noted, still allows for specialization while simultaneously eradicating the elitism that results from the corporate division of labor. Because say the surgeon is still doing 80% surgery. They're just doing their 20% cleanup, and the janitor does 80% cleaning and then 20% bookkeeping.
Yeah, exactly.
That way, when the meeting to vote on something occurs, he knows what the books are like, or he knows what the finances are like. So anyway, let's see. Okay, so combined, these two new institutions remove the power source of the capitalist class and the coordinator class, referring to the councils and the job complex. Complex jobs, you call them. So replacing them with institutions that generate classlessness. However, they in themselves do not constitute a full working model. So in addition to a self-managed councils and job complexes, the Parecon model proposes two more. The first is basically how value is disseminated.
Yeah, okay.
The first is how wages, technically, quote-unquote wages.
Right.
Remuneration for effort and sacrifice. How people, like, what are people paid? Like, what's the basis that people are paid? Currently, this could be debated, I guess. We're paid based on the value we generate for capitalists. That is why a pop star can be paid what they are, or a musician / sports player, and a janitor is always going to be paid the lowest, or a teenager or something. That, they're not generating quote unquote value. Now, of course, we know better. We know that all workers are the ones generating all the value, and that a capitalist or someone who's shifting numbers around on Wall Street isn't generating any actual value. At least they're generating value for capitalism or capitalists, but not social or any other kind of value. So there's obviously other ways of measuring value, which is something that in most economic discussions goes out the window, as even socialists or lefties, or maybe just I'm thinking of liberals, will talk of GDP growth and using GDP to measure things, when really that is the capitalist indicator for growth and success, not any other.
That frustrates me a lot too, especially among fellow anarchists. I get a lot of people talking, well, the GDP, it's like, who cares? That's not what we're looking. I know this is kind of a tangent, but I know,
but why would an anarchist care about GDP?
Exactly. Like, that's not the point. The point is we need to focus on eliminating the idea of GDPs.
Yeah, they're caring about what capitalists care about.
Yeah,
and that's not being radical at all, is it?
No.
So instead of and this is beyond even Marx's line of remuneration based on based on need or ability to work.
To each
their ability.
Yeah, to each their from each their ability, to each what they need.
Yeah, that still has its limitations.
Yeah.
So here's because it's the ability of a sports star. That they're being paid based on their ability. Anyway, so an alternative to all of that, and even ones that are just based on ability, alternative to remunerate. But capitalism is remuneration for ownership and bargaining power.
Yes.
So the Parecon model offers remuneration for effort and sacrifice. So not only like how much you work or how hard you work, or if you work smarter, not harder, it's also taking into account the sacrifice you make. So if you have more education, that counts as a sacrifice. If you do work that is more dangerous, that is a sacrifice.
Well,
So this criteria for remuneration simply states that, one, the harder you work, the more economic rewards you should get. I think everyone already assumes that, by the way, but it's not true in capitalism, but that's what everyone wants. And two, the longer you work, the more economic rewards you receive. Harder or longer, And 3, the more onerous the task, the more economic rewards you should receive. So this is, everyone tacitly already believes this, but it's not how our economy works. You do get some reward, you do get some wages for working hard, long, or in an onerous task, but nowhere near the actual social value you create, and not based on that, because there's no onerousness to working as an executive. You're not working very hard if you are an academic, and you're not working and you're not working very long if you're a trader or something.
No, exactly. And I feel
or
like
name a job that you're only working an hour a day.
Yeah, like, if I guess flipping, I've only worked like labor jobs where like I'm either doing construction or I'm doing stuff like that. So like, maybe like
It hits all 3.
Professional podcaster.
It'll be a long day. You work hard, and if you're depending on the work site, it's hazardous.
Oh yeah, no.
I mean, if you're dealing with fiberglass or digging.
Yeah, no. But we can even go like podcasters only work like an hour a day, and then you get like Joe Rogan making millions of dollars. So
yeah, exactly.
Which I'm not saying. I'm not saying he doesn't work hard. I run a podcast and it's not easy, but it's,
sure.
It's
but it's not onerous. There's not much sacrifice.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we need to
safe in a room.
I think we need to put a pin in that for a second, because I do want to mention that not only is this a misnomer as far as like capitalism goes, it's a misnomer in all work. Like you can say, well, what about community work? There are people who have been doing community work for years who aren't getting any recognition.
Cent, yeah.
And then there are people who are getting who go out and do like an hour of community service, and they are put in the papers because of their status. So we need to understand that it doesn't even work in a non-capitalist sense. Non-capitalist sense, it works.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, because it's still in capitalism. You can be as non-capitalist as you want, but as long as the base is still capitalist, it's going to be capitalism.
Exactly.
And that is kind of I think it's a strike against gradualism. It's a strike against reformism of any kind, really.
Yeah.
Which is why I mentioned that reformism is the carousel. You're just going around in a circle. Revolution's the boss.
No, exactly. I think one thing I want to mention too is that
Go ahead.
Part of the reason I'm such an anti-work activist, it's not because I don't like work. I actually, as crazy as it sounds, I actually do like to work. I like going to my job, not necessarily because I like my job, but because I like helping people. I like providing a service. But it's the fact that we're not rewarded. If you want to do something, you should be able to. I want to go out and cook. I should be able to cook. I shouldn't have to go through all these hoops to do it. And obviously I need to be safe, but I don't get that mindset. I don't get to do that because all that. I do my job. I enjoy doing my job, but I'm not rewarded for what I do. I do more tasks. I do more jobs than my actual job description. So at this point, I feel...
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Everyone does. I mean, it's that trope of if everyone was actually paid for all the actual work they do, whether it's in the home, that could be done by a service worker, then everyone would be a millionaire.
No, exactly.
Or at least have $100,000 salary.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where the basis. I mean, it's one of the basis for giving a UBI out. Everyone does basic chores and work and labor all the time in all different ways. So even just to compensate the community worker or the person who's retired doing community stuff, and socially valuable labor, the UBI compensates them for that, at least in a basic way.
Yeah.
And that way it's something to demand based on no, we actually deserve a UBI. It's not just something that's an economic fix or a Band-Aid. It's no, we actually deserve it. We need it. That we get it. Now, it's also should be mentioned. We'll go into this in the second hour, basically.
Yeah.
Because it'll be mentioned. It's assumed that a UBI, a lot of other socialist or social democrat stuff is already in place. Parecon doesn't replace any of that.
Right.
So the last part, in the last few minutes of this hour, and then we'll go deeper, is the actual planning process, participatory planning, to replace markets. All right, this replaces markets, which even a lot of lefties don't want to let go of markets. I don't know why. I think it's because of it's a form of individualism, or maybe a lack of imagination that markets somehow protect individual freedom. That if you don't have markets, you must have top-down planning. But I think if you believe in worker democracy, then you probably can believe in democratic planning. So an alternative to competitive markets and central planning, the Parecon model offers a participatory planning process. Cooperative, in which producers, via their councils, and consumers, via their councils, propose and revise their economic activities in a series of rounds until they arrive on a mutually agreed plan. So imagine, to boil it down, a neighborhood consumer council orders this much toilet paper. Right. The factory that does paper products, co-op, whatever, that workers' council says, well, based on the resources at hand and the prices that have been fixed or at least proposed, we can make this much toilet paper. It's also based on how much work we want to do. We don't want to work more than, say, 4 days a week, so this is how much toilet paper we're going to make. And if those numbers don't match, then those two groups need to revise their plan until it is, okay, we're going to make this much TP. You're going to use this much TP. We're also going to factor in 10% surplus for emergency diarrhea.
Right.
Or people need, if they need extra TP, it will be there. But that should probably be baked into consumer plans of like, oh, we want 10% surplus on top of what we need, or on top of the amount of TP we used last year, kind of thing. And that's where your taxes then just become what we used last year. An actual accounting of this is what we actually used in electronics and consumer goods and food and so on. We finished going through the first kind of the basic versions of the four institutions of Parecon, participatory economics. And now we're going to just wrap up from this writer, this trade union guy. So Parecon can form a global unionism. Parecon is an easily understandable economic model that requires no formal training in economics to grasp. It is therefore accessible to a majority of people, including trade union activists, with an interest in organizing for economic justice the world over. A big part of the initial work that would need to take place in overcoming the twofold crisis, not only of socialism but of trade union movement, is to popularize the Parecon model within organized labor. So we plant the seeds. As awareness of and support of Parecon model grows within organized labor and other trade unionists, they undoubtedly use this knowledge to inform the structure of their own organization, to have more balanced jobs within it. And by the way, Michael Albert and company, they when they started their own publishing company, they employed balanced jobs, or maybe came up with the idea from how they did things in their own hippie way, because in communes where you share all the chores. Right. So it's like they were all equals. There was no hierarchy in their, and the same with direct democracy. It works well when everyone has the same level of information, which you get from mostly the anarchist way of disseminating information. So they can use it to inform their own campaigns when initiating economic justice. This dynamic would mean that with every victory won by a Parecon-informed unionist movement, it would take the unions a step closer to becoming a fully functioning, self-managing worker council. In this sense, global unions could be understood as self-managed worker councils in an embryonic form, planting the seed of the future in the present, building the new world in the shell of the old, which is slightly different by having the vision. If co-ops, when they start now, have the vision that eventually there'll be a co-op federation that can supplant or start doing economics outside of the capitalist mode of production. But so far, I don't see that vision existing so much. Like, how would they operate outside the capitalist mode of production if there's enough co-ops, this co-op economy? I don't see that expressed very much.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And from my understanding of co-ops, it's really just, a lot of them are just so community based that there's no there's no like, I won't say global takeover because that sounds like the capitalist thing, but like there's no way to like stretch out and like reach out. And that's, I've been
Scale
actually,
up.
I've been actually in the process of researching and getting a plan together for my own co-op. And part of my whole goal is to reach out and have that federation of co-ops to, I mean, obviously we're not going to be able to compete with some of the heavy hitters, but like,
yeah. So Mondragon is a federation of co-ops, I believe.
Yeah.
And that's why they're kind of a model. But I pointed out that this, I think it was a Wobbly pointing this out, like that was making an anti-co-op case. By Wobbly, an IWW person.
Right.
And they were making they were pointing out that like Franco loved Mondragon. Like they got medals on how they developed this rural, poor area that capitalism just let die. And they're like, oh, great. Now they won't revolt against our regime. Good job.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Which is what all reformism kind of leads to, people not revolting.
No.
Which is why a lot of people love reforms, because they stop violence / overthrow or upheaval. But it also prevents other alternatives from actually getting a chance.
Basically, reform is you're miserable, but you're slightly less miserable, so it's fine.
More or less. I have a particular little comic where it's like two men are rolling out a carpet, and the carpet has like reform on it. And then there are two men with corruption labels on them, and they're rolling the carpet up behind them.
Yeah.
But there is such a thing as and I like this term because it's just weird enough, the non-reformist reform. The transition from a capitalist or coordinatorist economy towards a participatory or a democratic one cannot happen overnight in a single step. Yes, Parecon is a revolutionary vision, but to reach it requires a transition that can only come via reforms. So this is on the other hand. But this insight has led to the development of some advocates call the strategy of non-reformist reforms, but which has meant a series of changes, step by step, informed by the vision of a new social system that ultimately leads to the new one. Okay. So this is where it's like having the vision helps you have different kinds of steps that are non-reformist, that are not just making things better within the capitalist mode of production, but like building dual power to replace it. Right. I think a non-reformist reform would be like nationalization.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense.
So it's the last conclusion here. Parecon-informed global unionism could engage in such a non-reformist reform activity, and in so doing, plant the seeds. So basically, instead of unions just fighting for better conditions and better pay and the usual stuff, where it's like, look, we're not challenging the ownership, but we just want a better deal. No, when the union wants to buy out the company or it wants to be the company, and then it's a worker council. So this, I've argued, would help overcome the twofold crisis, accurately highlighted by the lifelong trade unionist Dan Gallen. Furthermore, I've argued that such organizational efforts as those briefly described in the above could play a crucial part in mounting a much-needed serious challenge to the international system of globalization. So there's that. So I'll get into actually how that can actually be done, or how it's facilitated in my talk version. So we'll take a short break, or we'll just pretend we're taking a break, and we'll see you on the other side of the hour with my guest, the Mayhem Calling. Or that's the name of your show.
Yeah.
T-misanthrope.
Yeah, but you can call me the Mayhem Calling. I don't mind. Everyone does.
Okay. Yeah, everyone. Yeah.
Even
they can call people can call me Three Lefts, I guess. But yeah, I go by my real name. So I was never cool enough or creative enough as a kid to have a nickname. Most people at least make their own in puberty, but I didn't. I don't know why. I have no.
Is your official name Dan?
Yeah.
Oh, so that's okay. So you're not even like a Daniel or anything like that.
Oh well, no, it is. But
I guess you can. I guess you can argue that
shortening my name. It's such a simple thing. It's not a nickname.
Hey, even any amount of effort put into a nickname makes it a nickname, even if the effort is minimal.
Think of how Vosh, like his screen name comes from like a screen name he made, Voshy Boy or something, and same with Destiny. It's just like, oh, I thought it was a cool name when I was 13. I didn't have any such impulse to make myself a nickname. I came across an email address in my job, which was Goldfish Killer. And that was when I got him on the phone, I asked him about it because it made me chuckle. And he said, yeah, it was just a dumb name. I didn't mean to change it. I said, no, you don't have to change it. It's cool.
Yeah, it's funny. I have if we want, we can go into the history of my nickname later on. But right now, let's enjoy the break.
Sure. Okay, and we're back from a little break. Back with Misanthrope, the Mayhem Calling, special guest as we talk Parecon, or at least I cover the short and deeper version of it, and he reacts just to see if this is something people can follow, especially if they're already a radical, which is the usual audience. Like, is a debate of, like, what kind of post-capitalism are we fighting for? Which is kind of an important question, which I'm not sure is asked enough, especially in democratic socialist circles, because, I mean, at the end of the day, they'll admit they don't want to overturn capitalism, which is odd since anti-capitalism is very, very popular. But they don't want to push too far because there's kind of a limit to how much they can go in our current power structure. But anyway.
Okay.
So let me bring up my own stuff. Parecon talk. So I want to avoid redundant information here. So let's see. I frame it as an alternative to markets and authoritarian planning. Fighting for social and economic change can seem too big for any of us, which can lead to hopelessness and apathy. But as an antidote to that is to have a vision, gradual or otherwise, which can help us see where we might want to go as we fight to obtain goals. So I make the case in this talk of why replacing the entire economic system. Any left-wing radical does not need to hear this.
Okay.
Then there's the question brought up in the books of talking about what an economy is, or what that economy should have goals. At the moment, capitalism has the goal of, like, what is capitalism's goal? Any guesses?
So, do you want the stated goal, or do you want the actual goal behind the curtain?
I guess there is a stated goal of, like, maximizing human capacity or something, but
yeah, like the actual goal of communism is, or not communism, sorry, capitalism.
Capitalism.
Yeah. The
goal of communism is always statelessness and classes.
Yes, the capitalist goal is basically endless consumption. And I know, like, that's kind of dumbing it down, but that is basically the goal. Like, you want...
Yeah.
We have, like, labs, like, making steak. They're making air in bottles. They're doing that on purpose because they know resources are finite. So they want to maximize the consumption. They want to maximize profit. They want to maximize just continuation.
Endless consumption. That's actually a pretty good answer, because it's something to ask your local capitalist. What is the goal? And they'll probably say, "Oh, to maximize everyone's benefit. That's what markets do." And more people realize that as things chug along, especially if you just take the climate crisis on its own.
No, absolutely. Like,
I don't think killing ourselves. I think causing a mass sixth extinction, which may include us eventually, doesn't maximize human benefit or whatever. But anyway, so let's define. Yeah, no, go on.
Sorry, I just want to say, like, that's the funniest thing about, like, any sort of, like, company that talks about environmentalism. Like, oh, we're environmentally friendly. It's like, okay, then stop being a capitalist. Stop being a profit-driven company. That's
I mean, if you can be net zero, but see, the thing is, they are saying that, but by net zero, they mean preventing a forest from being cut down. They're using potential pollution as a way of offsetting the pollution they create, and then saying that that's net zero.
Or they're doing the
I don't want to digress.
Yeah.
I don't want to digress too much, because I've covered that. So So it's about, let's define what the economy is, or rather what we want out of the economy. What are our goals? So as leftists, any kind of leftists, our goals should kind of basically, I think we could describe them, economic democracy, which doesn't imply majority rule, because conversely, some decisions do affect everyone equally. Instead, the goal is a participatory one of self-management, which is the capacity to analyze and evaluate the consequences of our action. It means decision-making power is proportion to those affected, right? So economic justice would be goal 2. And then I go into different versions of economic justice. So there's a liberal view that, and then I go through the different ways of rewarding labor as a way of getting into the, part 3.
Yes.
Which is that there's a liberal view that the reward is equal to labor, which is sound good on its face, but it suffers from the same reason that socialists reject income based on ownership. This is because most differences in people's personal productivity depend on factors over which they don't have much control. For example, the value of what people produce depends largely on the number of people working in their category of labor. Changes in consumer demand affect it, quality of machines or nature. Most importantly, the intrinsic qualities of people themselves. We're all different, so we can't have an equal society. But what it does destroy is the moral imperative for the view that we can reward people based on how strong they are or how smart they are, analytical. It's not a moral argument for paying those people more. Just as we would oppose the inheritance lottery of a billionaire's grandson, we should do so the same for the genetic lottery winner, like those who are pro athletes or pop stars.
Right.
What can we say? Well, of course, some pop stars are just family members of other older pop stars.
Correct.
So that way, it's another form of inherited wealth. So what we can control is the amount of effort we expend, the sacrifices we make day to day, so on and so on. Okay, so goal 3 is solidarity. There's actually not, there's a lot of goals here, but one, solidarity, that we have a goal promoting general concern for others and community. The goal 4 is diversity. Diversity refers to people having a large variety of choices to fulfill their needs and desires. Since humans show a large variety of preferences and lifestyle, the best life for one is not necessarily the best for another. Variety adds to the richness of life, so a participatory economy rejects conformity, homogenization, and regimenting. The other benefit of valuing diversity is that we don't place all our eggs in one basket. It is important to experiment with different ideas and viewpoints in case one turns out to be wrong. It allows for, innovation. But we need the goal of efficiency. Number 5 is efficiency. First, to clarify the goal that efficiency is not the same as profitability. It is getting the job done in the best way. We're often told that the virtue of free markets is that they are efficient. But what is efficient about an economy that results in global warming, financial crises, booms and busts, and persistent unemployment? We should value efficiency because we don't like to waste scarce resources and our time performing, if you are aware of David Graeber's book, Bull Jobs, we don't want to waste our time doing bull jobs or jobs with no social value, all of which all happens in the current status quo. If you're not aware of David Graeber, it's like 40% of jobs are like bulls.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah. And I would argue that the amount is more, but I will get into that a little bit later if you want to.
If we have time.
Yeah.
So number 6 and the last one is, of course, sustainability. To have an economy that can go on another 6 generations. Just put it that way. But in Parecon, the burden of proof is to use natural resources. To use natural resources is on those who wish to use them. So then I go through the elements. Number 1 being the commons, social ownership, and that when allocation happens, it's user rights. Your credit or your wages are in the form of user rights. Democratic councils, go through those, workers, consumers. What else did I write about that I take from the books? The consumption rights of a council invokes are constrained based on an individual member's income. Any member of society who is excused from work for reasons such as illness, retirement, or being a child will have a consumption allowance determined by society as a whole, UBI. This process can also remove the bias against consumer sovereignty, in which entities turn out products in a take-it-or-leave-it fashion, allowing for some real freedom of choice. For larger requests and needs, groups of councils were organized federations on the neighborhood, city, region, and national level. This nesting of councils is needed because different decisions impact various sections of a population differently. And regardless of the level, transaction costs of making such decisions are lowered. Transaction cost, I think that's something used by Parecon a lot. Meaning the effort it takes to divvy up public resources evenly and fairly is thus more simple and direct. For example, of a single city. A single federation of neighborhood consumer councils would have reps that would discuss and vote on the relative merits of a citywide public good, be they a park or a fire engine. Such reps could be rotated, subject to recall, and instructed by a lower level to do the right thing. At the national level, similar reps would then discuss planning on construction of national level public goods, infrastructure, science, funding, healthcare, and defense. Or even defense, but
Yeah.
But maybe in the form of a world peace, international world. I think defense would form like we have ceremonial armies that duke it out with paintball guns.
Yeah, I mean,
like for fun.
You gotta do something to get
it's pay-per-view.
That's I would actually.
The aggressive tendencies, to get out the aggressive tendencies, and because there's no stakes, as many people could volunteer as possible to do it.
Absolutely,
really big thing of it. And I even think it's totally fiction, but there's an anime called Girls and Tanks where there's a sport of tank battles, and I think it would still take a lot of resources, but it would probably be a fraction of what we spend now to have tank battles as a sport.
I mean, we could.
If they're using paintball rounds, they don't need the armor, and so they don't need the they don't have to burn free fuel.
I actually kind of like the idea of having tank battles. We can make it like battle bots. We get the team,
yeah,
or the whole military,
exactly,
and then just they build the best tank possible, and they just duke it out.
Yeah, we can be patriotic, or it's a team of tanks. And they use paintball rounds, shells that when on impact, it's just, you got covered in the purple paint, you're out.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Do it
Yeah.
Do it. That's
about explosions, then I guess we could do simulated war where it's just it's like an air show, but with tanks.
Yeah, basically, if the tank is covered in paintballs, there's a little trigger inside that blows up. Goes boom.
Yeah. It starts smoking. It just smoke machines comes off. Yeah.
That's the only good use of drones, by the way. Not to strike people, but just to make fun tank battles that are just fun. That's the only way I would. That's the only way I would advocate for drones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to shoot the video. So anyway, moving on. Let's see. So that's the councils. A little more on balanced jobs. Let's see. I wrote that, it's disempowering work that consists of repetitive or mundane labor, while empowering work consists of professional technical labor. The uneven distribution of these tasks creates hierarchical economies, which creates a minority that tends to monopolize information. So we already covered this. Basically creates uneven meetings, and eventually it's you don't know anything, so you don't even need to be in the meeting. How many times? I mean, and government officials even will be well, this meeting doesn't have to be public because no one has the information we have. No one knows what we're talking about. So why does it matter if we're public or not? And so you have to kind of sue a bit or be attentive to enforce what New York has, which is a public meetings law that all public meetings need to actually be accessible. But during the pandemic, you had a lot of these committees, they were just having Zoom calls and they weren't making them accessible. You couldn't watch them. They weren't recording them. They were breaking public meeting law.
Yeah.
Or they didn't send out a link. You couldn't join the Zoom call as a spectator. So more on remuneration, the consumption for effort. So this is people are, paid by or granted user rights based on effort and sacrifice. Well, how does that work?
So
no, you're about to ask? So we know an economy should be fair, practical criterion for distributing income. Quantitative information is necessary for any allocation system to function, at least to be efficient. So in light of our previous discussion on justice, let's ask ourselves why a surgeon is paid more than a miner. Even though one has put in the effort of going through med school, the other sacrifices their body and risks their life, and no one can argue the effort in mining. So Parecon seeks to compensate workers according to their effort and the sacrifice. I was just explaining that part. But now on the effort writing, on the next part. Workplaces would be asked to provide members effort ratings. This means that those who choose to make a greater personal sacrifice at work, like I'm going to work 2 extra hours, or I'm going to work a lot, like hard or whatever. But now measuring this effort is left to be democratically chosen by the workers. It's, collective. It's a co-op. So they're choosing how to allocate effort ratings. Like, you get 5 points for staying an extra hour or whatever. No rulers, just people making their own rules. For example, a workplace might want to set up an effort rating committee, set rules for the number of members, the length of service, rules for rotation, whatever. The only restriction a worker council would have on assigning these ratings, to prevent abuse, would be to cap the amount of effort ratings they could put out. They say, like, you only have 100 credits, basically, and then you're deciding how to allocate them within your workplace, kind of thing.
Okay.
No, and the cap is determined by, like, that agreed upon plan, because it's in the plan that you did kind of is what's determined how much work not only can be done, but like is going to be done. So it's like this is the amount of consumption that can happen. So these are the amount of credits. So we're assigning every workplace based on their number of members. This is how many credits you can give out, or the effort ratings, or whatever.
Yeah.
So a little more word on consumption, which is from the books. On saving credits for later, which is simply as using less. So it's no different than using cash. They are a person's rights, and like anything earned, they cannot be taken away. So can be saved like money, but are currency without any compound interest or investment potential, and thus there's no incentive for extreme accumulation. You use it or you're just not using it, and if there's no point in not using it, unless you're saving for a time, car, something cool.
Right.
Get your own tank.
No, exactly.
Borrowing credits can be done through your consumer council, which acts as a loan office. Instead of doing it from a profit-seeking bank, it's your neighbor who can best judge whether you can make the commitment to consume less later or to do some more work now. Interest and risk premiums would be tricky to work out, but may not even be needed at all. In the Islamic world, loans simply have a set fee attached. This could be done here, but there is surely other solutions too. So it's still like whatever, to be determined at a later date.
Right.
Don't have to work every little thing out, just like how, some liberal critics like to say of socialists, like you haven't worked out your utopia, or it's utopian. So it can't happen, and there's no point in trying. We have to be capitalist realists. So let's see, deciding one's consumption and changing your mind. So the request for consumption that people in their councils make is kind of like a pre-order economy, choosing from a broader list of categories like a shirt or a bike. The proposal from a consumer council then is like a best guess. And so you go to the bike shop and then you get to pick a bike, and it can be whatever kind of bike is there because the bike factory they decided they're going to make 20 different types of bikes or whatever. Kind of like in Yugoslavia, there was like 30 types of chocolate.
Yeah.
So that's just covering that part. Now for the nitty gritty of the planning, which is kind of, I feel like, important, because otherwise it's like, when you say you're going to replace markets with something participatory, isn't markets something you participate in? No, because we're not determining prices democratically. We're not determining allocation democratically. Anyway, it's all purchase agents. So now we have commons, workers, and councils. How do they coordinate? An economic system, at the heart of everything, is how it's allocated. So it's participatory. It's horizontal procedure that grants user rights for the commons for production and then balancing it with the earned credits of workers for consumption. So between the two sides is a mediator that the writers, Albert calls the Iteration Facilitation Board, IFB. So through it, there's 4 steps so I mentioned rounds between the consumers and producers. So here's what a round consists of. So the first step is, say, this board.
Okay.
It's for an expansive data collection, but it's not big data. It's big data, but it's not instead of giving it to marketers, it's used to actually determine who needs what. But it's not who needs what, actually. It's just collecting data to calculate the opportunity cost for natural resources, categories of labor, capital stacks, which refers to invested equity, and to basically determine an indicative price. But opportunity cost is the relative cost of using one thing over another.
Okay.
Mining granite versus mining shale. But basically, it's kind of just indicative price. It's not like a set price forever. It's just the first it's indicative price.
Right. It's how much. Much they have versus how much is needed, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Right. What's the amount of oil versus the amount we can burn safely? Yeah. So step 2 is councils will then study the prices and the data that the IFB generates, because that's something different from capitalist markets. All this data is in fact actually open and accessible.
Okay.
To make their proposals. So first, consumers would make their requests. So it is in fact demand side economics. Consumers make the requests for goods and services. They demand it. Then workers then put in their request for inputs, like what they may need and how many credits based on their effort ratings they would get or they would want. The outputs, like the quality of what they'll make and do, are included, and requests also include intermediate goods. Third step is then the board adds all of these proposals and then adjusts their estimate for the cost to the degree of access, supply, and demand. So you have the consumers say demand X, and then producers say this could be the supply, like I described with the toilet paper.
Right.
And it adjusts these estimates. It adjusts their estimate for the cost, the prices, based on the supply and demand. So you actually get that actual neoliberal supply and demand curve for price. It actually does that. Instead of the fantasy of assuming a market, it does that.
Exactly.
Which it doesn't.
Exactly.
So everyone reacts to the new price put out by the board, and then they change their proposal as such. The consumers want more TP than we were willing to make. We'll have to adjust so that we work another 2 hours a week. And then this was repeated, with a round being each time a proposal is modified. I don't know when they did this, but Albert and Handel, they modeled this process and found that the average number of rounds to reach equilibrium is between 7 and 11.
Okay.
That's how many times that with all the unions and all of the stuff, they'd be negotiating, but not with each other, right? It's not political. The board facilitates, so it's just the data.
Right.
Now, so the political decision is what natural resources are available. But if we're using the values of sustainability, it's probably going to be capped at something.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. So for the approval process for proposals, a formula can produce a single variable. So to make sure, so what counts as what proposals aren't they have to be approved as being feasible or moral. How do we do this? Well, he proposes a single variable, which would be a ratio of social benefit over social cost if it's a producer. And if it's a consumer, it's the cost of the goods over their average effort rating, plus any allowance they get. So supplying such a figure during each round helps people make a socially responsible decision and help them produce proposals in balance with others. So it whittles down overly ambitious proposals, as well as, if someone's maybe, oh, you could actually order more than you did before. So, and the ratio is more than 1, it's rejected. If it's less, that's approved. Using these ratios, if a plan is not in net balance, it is sent back for revision. In this way, it is like everyone is the person who says no instead of the board, because the plan only works if it can work with everyone else's plan. Human behavior is such, and this is my insertion. I forget if Parecon put this in or if it's just me writing this. But human behavior is such that if everyone is the bad guy, it is the same as if no one is the bad guy.
Yeah.
So with each, I mean, that's how we feel when we're in a community, right? And that's how
Exactly.
how we actually not have cancel culture. Like, if you're in a group of friends and everybody is like being full, it's accepted that like, oh yeah, we're just fooling around, or this is how we have fun.
Exactly.
I don't know. Maybe I'm being a bro, but
no, that makes perfect sense.
It's not some authority saying your proposal is bad. It's like, look, we have this ratio, and this is kind of how a lot of bureaucracy works, and it's maybe. And David Graeber's other book, the Utopia of Rules, it's a left-wing critique of bureaucracy.
Yeah,
is that one of the promises of bureaucracy is that it makes things fair, but usually it just reinforces the hierarchies of society that already exist. But one thing that kind of, at least when it comes to customer service, is like, look, and this is something that if you've ever done any customer service, it's always like, look, it's not you saying that the customer can't do X or get a refund. It's the rules that say.
Right.
And that way they won't get mad at you, but they can be mad at the company or mad at their God.
That's the theory, but they're always mad at you.
They're definitely mad at you. Yeah. It doesn't help. So maybe I'm just, okay, whatever. Cross that out.
It's a good, like, that's one thing I just want to like interject real quick. That is a good like concept. Of course, like, everyone knows it's not your fault. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions that like people who work in retail think, is that they think that everyone thinks it's our fault. No, they know it's not our fault, but you are the face they see.
Yeah. But see, the board isn't really a face. It's like the big data company. And just so like maybe it's not going to have a face. Like, I guess there'll be people attached, but it's mostly professionals. It's got to be a class of people, but they're not a managing class. They're not a class with like administrative power. They're just the class that is doing labor, just like any other.
Yeah,
group.
it's their specific job.
And that way, they're not a class. They are just another category of labor.
Yeah.
The data entryist or the programmer.
Yeah. So
I'm about at the end of this.
Okay, I'll let you finish.
So with each round, councils can shift their proposals in response to updated info. So the board is pretty hands-off when it comes to telling councils how to fix their proposals. Only councils can revise their plan if it is rejected as too unjust or too inefficient. Meaning autonomy is retained and people can self-regulate. Oh, self-regulate. Yeah, people can actually self-regulate. Okay, so that's the end of that. That part anyway. So what was your
So okay, first off,
thought?
I wanted to like hit on the credit system real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Like the effort credit.
Yeah.
Theoretically, it's a good idea, but that's basically just capitalism. I know like there's ways that we can argue it's not. But like if I work overtime at work, I get time and a half. So how is that different than, getting 5 extra effort credits?
Well, essentially I think it isn't, but I think it's pointed out that there's a cap on the number of effort credits. So eventually you can't there's only so much overtime you can do.
No, absolutely. And I understand that to an extent.
Or there's only an amount that the plan will allow you to do.
Right.
Because at this point, we can't, there's actually a maximum. And this is where it comes into the concept that doesn't get bandied about in any socialist discourse is the maximum income.
Right.
It basically, there would be a maximum income. And that's something that because most socialists are market socialists, and in markets you can't put a cap on income.
No.
Because it's still a market, and but that's like saying you accept there's going to be a lot of inequality, or that your goal is just to reduce it to a point where it doesn't matter, but this is what reduces inequality to where it doesn't matter. Or if there is inequality, it really is based on someone doing overtime, because it's the only way. The other way is the credit, but again, like it's actual credit. You get it, you get upfront more user rights, but you have to accept less user rights later.
I see that, and like it's, how do I put it? It kind of feels a lot like if we're going to have effort credits, we might as well not get rid of the market that we have. We just, we just democratize it to a point where it's eliminates inequality and it puts a pay cap. But other than that, there's like no reason to get rid of it. As
it could do this. Get rid of markets, you mean, or
like it can't get rid of markets as we know them. The way that we're describing it, it's pretty much just a more democratic version. Which,
because I wish socialists could describe what a socialist market is really like. But I suppose that's what the Soviet Union had, and it was kind of pretty inefficient at times.
Yeah, and I think
the point is that the economy is like, usually I think people are thinking of a market as being like the ability to go to a store and buy something. That's not what I'm talking about. A market is referring to how things, it's the mechanism for how things are allocated.
Yeah.
And not how things are actually used.
Yeah, and that, that makes sense right there. That part...
It could be, just having a pay cap would be like that non-reformist reform. It's a step towards doing this. Or when if it is ever done, it's done in a different form. It's not done exactly like effort ratings. It's just a matter of saying that you need these 4 different institutions to like work to, or something like them working together to have an economy that isn't dominated by a class over another class.
That's like, I like the idea as far as it goes, but at the end of the day, it's still just capitalist light. It's just taking the ideas of capitalism and putting them into a more fair system. Which,
you think so?
Yeah. Because, like, basically what it's doing is it's, like, you still have effort credit. So, like, there's still going to be the people who are like, well, I'm a hard worker. I am still, like with me, I work 2 jobs and, I've been out of work for a couple weeks. I wasn't fired or anything. I've just had time off. But... like whenever I work 2 jobs. I'm always working. Then I come home and I do work. I take care of animals. I do my podcast. I do videos for YouTube and all that stuff. People they praise that. And the goal of socialism should not be to praise hard work. It should be to work as little as possible. So to have any sort of like credit system, any sort of system where you are rewarded for doing more, that at the end of the day, just makes it like it defeats
just the fact that it has that, even if the amount of effort ratings and thus the credits you could get at a workplace would be capped.
Yeah, even just that alone, that's just like, okay, well, you're still going to be.
That does not make it, but that does not make it capitalism though, because you don't get more political power from that.
No, you don't get more political power, but like at the end of the day, capitalists believe that there's no political power in money. If you ask a capitalist, they just say, oh, no, I'm just rich. I have personal power. I don't have political power, even though they're buying the politicians.
Yeah, but they're bullshitting.
They are, but, like, I'm talking, like, if you ask a capitalist...
Just because something has just because of one instance of this that's in common with, like, how we, spend money or something. I'm using that actually as a way of, like, identifying that this is something that actually could exist and isn't something that is antithetical to... I don't know how we live today in the slightest. Okay. Well, we can move on, though.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add, like, one more thing, too.
Go ahead.
So, that's part of the reason why I'm part of the anti-work movement. It's not because I don't want people to, like, have that skill. Like, there is value in going out and doing stuff and helping people and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, like, effort...
Work sucks.
Yeah, work sucks. Effort should not be rewarded for doing more. It should only be personal, like personal reward. Like I feel good about doing this. I feel good because I put in the work for this. It should not be a requirement to get more credits. It should not be a requirement to get more money. It should not be a requirement to move forward in life. Which, I know.
Maybe,
I know what you're saying.
Maybe it could help if I went through. So I actually have a whole page here.
Okay.
On maybe addressing these issues. So first, I really labeled it concerns.
Yeah.
So there are many concerns. Let's see. For when the numbers don't make sense to anyone and council proposals are on the line, there would be appeal procedures for councils with the board. There would also be, and the cost-benefit ratio standard can be chosen to put a cap on effort ratings, which in turn also caps inflation. For example, an average cap could be 100 times a council's social cost-benefit ratio. Let's see, something about, okay, let me skip ahead to incentives, which would be the topic, but this is more like a response to more of a liberal topic. We're thinking about economics, so the incentives that are at play. The incentive to do a good job, to be an honest actor, to innovate, to have positive feedback loops. All the things we were told only capitalist and authoritarian systems allow. But we know through personal experience that is not the case. We are in fact surrounded by negative feedback loops. Another reason to explore incentives is the question of having a society that values and protects both goods and community self-interest, or community and individual self-interest. Capitalism usually puts them in conflict, when that is not the way it must be. So first is the motivational incentive. How are we motivated at work to do a good job, to work at all? Meeting our basic needs is the first, but to do a good job, we need to feel valued. We need to be empowered to have an amount of responsibility, a sense of mastery. If people take part in making the decisions of the workplace, own a share of it, have their work compensated fairly, there is controlled self-worth. If one work is judged by workmates it is your workmates who are judging your work through effort ratings. And this is decided by consensus. People's interests should align to their workplace and neighborhood. They don't, then there's real choice to find one and none at all. Because you can also have a worker council of one.
Yeah, sure.
So there's an incentive of allocation. What is the incentive to participate in the planning process? Rational self-interest, something that is not immoral by itself, would be that we want more input for ourselves. In Parecon, this can be fulfilled because council plans are also social interactions where everyone gets the most possible. So any worker would vote for the plan that grants them a good outcome. By spreading the work out the way full employment of Parecon does, we all work less and can get more. Whether a workplace proposal is to have more leisure time or more flexible hours or anything else, you make sure you get it by participating. Showing up is most of the battle when resources are being distributed. That way, we don't have to fight over redistribution of created wealth that's already been made. That's my jab at taxation.
Right.
Then there's dynamic efficiency, which is just another name for innovation. I think I don't need to explain that necessity is the mother of invention. And then I have some text about the life of an enterprise, like when you start a council and how a council could end, like what would going out of business entail. Yeah. But before, like if you can't make your plan work right, there would be like your industry council that would kind of give you advice. That they would send a fixer to help you out.
Right.
But if a workplace does end, let's say you have partners who don't want to work, have a falling out, or their approved plan. Let's see, if they don't have an approved plan by the last round and they've exhausted their appeals and social goods costs still outweigh their benefits. To prevent this, industry federations would provide help for those struggling. Doing the work professional organizations and unions do only without the zero-sum game of the current marketplace. In an economy where competition is unnecessary, enterprises can actually help each other to survive. Mutual aid replaces dog-eat-dog. And so on and so on. And then a word on like long-term planning, which then actually becomes what the political process is.
Right.
What to invest in, what to develop, or where. Things about protecting the environment. And then international trade would also be like trade balances would occur where, let's see, how was it described? Let's see, trade between different regions in a world economy. See, trade begets certain efficiency gains for each party. Between equal nations, the efficiency gain for trade should be shared as equally as possible. If one is trading with a wealthier economy, the poorer one would not be prevented from aiming to attain the best bargain it can get. More problem appears, though, when trading with a poor economy. In these cases, a Parecon would agree to terms that give the poor trading partner more than half of the efficiency gain, because citizens of poorer countries receive less economic reward for their effort, on average. As things improve, the ratio equalizes. And a word on secondhand goods. Secondhand goods can be defined as goods that already have been asked for, produced, and delivered. Durable goods like cars, machines, cameras. Right. It's important to recognize the risk of markets, black or otherwise, re-emerging, which would have a detrimental consequence. Something that absolutely, and this is something that exists with like secondhand, game by, how GameStop hates secondhand game markets.
Yeah,
buying used games. So let's see. So this is something that absolutely should and will happen. It's like a bartering, or it's saying that if you're going to like trade secondhand goods, you are actually bartering them. Right. Or it's like a gift economy. You just like, oh, I don't need this anymore. It's like the free store or the free market. Right. I mean, it would be like that. So if anything, we actually already have that, at least when it's radicals or social people doing it. So federations and councils could organize the trades without the need of a market. One way is that way you're not paying credits for a secondhand good. You just shouldn't do that. You wouldn't do it.
Right. No.
One way is people turn in used goods and receive consumption rights in return. But this would be the consumer council doing that, while others get said goods using their credits. Reprising schedules can be adjusted before the start of any planning year in light of access, demand, and supply. Changing as needed to held steady. Private exchanges can still happen with an alternative currency or barter, but are less likely to get out of hand, and they don't need to be treated as illicit. Like the Soviets may have done.
Yeah.
And then the thing about transition, I basically list all the different kinds of the tools in our toolbox.
Yeah.
Building economic reform movements, building co-ops, building the margins with mutual aid.
Right.
So on and so on. And then a conclusion. So yeah, this was just a talk.
Yeah.
It's kind of long. But I think I time myself. I think it takes me half an hour.
Yeah, no worries. I was just thinking, like, so far, I don't know, like, I'm not trying to, like, be a nitpicker here, but it just feels like this is all just a market. It's just all the market we have now, but we're just adding in strong welfare programs. It's basically like democratic socialism. That kind of like puts me at unease with the way that the Parecon model works, because
it's odd, because that's the usual response that I get after laying all this out. That strikes me as very odd, because I put in a fair amount of effort to explain how it's not like just welfare in capitalism.
No, and you do put a lot of it, and it's not necessarily you and your messaging that's wrong. It's the model itself, really. So the model itself has, like you said, like there's the effort credit, but there's a cap. There's a wage limit, like how much you can actually make. There's, if someone's struggling, it's mutual aid. At the end of the day, that's all just stuff we already have. It's just making it more fair.
No. The mutual aid part is like just part of the transition. It's not something that would.
Oh, gotcha.
Well, gotcha. I guess you have a point, but it's maybe just a matter of mixing. I've been saying a lot of different things at the same time.
No, okay.
The assumption is that the Parecon system is operating like completely. It's the top level of the economy. I think that's what's maybe the confusion. In talking about councils as co-ops or unions, I think we're still thinking in terms of an enterprise by an enterprise or a local barter economy. Parecon is like, this is like the whole country is like all the natural resources are in a commons, and that's being allocated based on all the unions negotiating through the round system. That is something that has never been done before, not even in socialist states, commies. because they collected information and made prices, but then they didn't let factories self-manage about what they would make. They would give orders. They would coordinate.
Yeah. So,
and the difference is that maybe it could still be described as like market just because there's credits. But I mean, this is something that all socialists talk about, like how to remunerate labor. But I think maybe that section could be taken out. That that with the plan being what it is,
yeah,
that if demand is met with the supply, that it's expected that you'll go into a store X amount of times and you'll get X amount of stuff.
Yeah.
And you don't need the credits to do, I don't know.
So, and like,
I think it's just saying like, you worked at this part. I think it's all just so that people have the quote unquote, well, the freedom to like, oh, I want an extra candy bar, more than the average, it's just so that everyone isn't getting the absolute equal amount of stuff. Because otherwise I think that's how it would come out.
No. And, like I totally understand that. And so like, here's where I come in with my anti-work movement.
Right.
As I said before, I'm not like, my whole thing is in a post-capitalist society, pretty much every job minus like a couple, and if you want to elaborate on that we can, would be able to be automated. We wouldn't have to have I'm actually writing a essay / paper / book. I don't know how big it's going to be right now.
The thing about this model is that like it's not really assuming the amount of work being done in the first place or how much is automated. Like it's definitely adaptable to any other kind of like if you're as a post-humanist.
Yeah.
If you're if you're anti-work, I think this could adapt to that. I mean, I think it's
basically just like
I think a critique is that it's not flexible, but I think it's only inflexible because, or it seems inflexible just compared to all the other levels of democratic socialism that people have on their minds. That it's beyond it. It's so far beyond it.
Right.
Like the fact that it assumes that all industry and such has been, if not nationalized, but it's common owned. It's commonly owned.
Right. And
I mean the workplaces aren't commonly owned. That the point is that the
resources, the actual resources.
The councils, it's the resources it's the base. The base is what matters. And the fact that the base is owned by 5 companies is kind of the problem. But just because if it was owned by 500 companies doesn't change the hierarchy.
Right.
Breaking up the monopolies doesn't fix
change
the problem.
Yeah. And that, I think that's kind of where like it can be flexible, and with the reconfiguring based on how anti-work happens, how automation happens, et cetera, that this can be like a whole workable model. But like I just see a lot of issues with the idea of credits. Basically, I look at it as this.
That is what people point out to as like their issue. It's just the credit system. It seems like that's the thing that needs to either be completely rethought or something.
I think honestly, because like as Marx put it, like for about, I think it was either Marx or Parecon that said that
labor vouchers or whatever. I don't know.
It wasn't even that. Like what they said was, like,
an ANCOM vision of society is just take and give.
Yeah.
Like there's this utopian novel, News from Nowhere.
Yeah.
Where I love this little bit. It's I'm just describing a vignette. But he walks into a tobacco shop. Of course, there's still a tobacco shop. Right. But he walks into a tobacco shop. It's being manned by 2 kids. Because they're basically just like hanging out.
Yeah. Exactly.
And the girl who's like the older one, the other kid is like just kind of messing around.
Right.
And she goes like, "Oh, hi, sir. We've got a number of nice tobaccos on offer. I'll fill your bag. Because everyone has like a tobacco pouch, I guess. But he pulls his out, and it's like, oh, that looks horrible. You need a new one. And it's like, oh, we got these nice ones in right here. Like here's one. I can set you up with it, and then I'll fill it up to the brim, and then he just gives it to him, and it's like, there you go. And he says like, well, how do I pay for this? And the girl's like, huh?
Yeah.
Sorry, the premise is a guy wakes up in the future.
Gotcha.
The great long-awaited future of 2005.
Oh my gosh. I can't wait for that.
It was read in 1890 something.
Right. No, but so like, I guess like a big thing too is that with that reconfiguring, the model is great, except for the loan part, but that would be taken out with the reconfiguring and without.
Yeah, that's an extra bit that was almost like added post hoc in the book.
Yeah, so like
because basically, well, the writers like they've like I said, they've updated their like scheme or when they write their books, they write it every 10 years, and what they add in, what I took out from like their last edition back in 2012 was like stuff they've been responding to, like people bring up their concerns, like someone must have brought up how you take a loan out. Like, what if you need an emergency amount of consumption credit, like a disaster befalls you? And he basically says, well, there's a type of mutual aid, like the Consumer Council has like an emergency fund. So if a tree falls on your house, then the value in the economy is there to get it fixed, labor and all.
Yeah. Okay. Like that part makes sense. Like, of course, in that kind of society, you would need something like that. So like my suggestion, honestly, and like obviously you're not the writer of this book, so
sure, but I have a propagator hat on, so yeah.
So like one thing I would suggest is first needing to just refigure it out, because like obviously the whole goal of the ANCOM movement is to work as little as possible, but still be, still have a place in society, still be able to get resources, and to be environmentally sustainable.
I think that's maybe there just needs just putting a line or two, kind of where saying like, well, I think I did like it through the planning process. Everyone can basically put in that they want to work as little as possible, or like, but that's how the planning, that's how the round process works. Everyone puts in an amount they want to work, which could be 2 hours a week, and everyone puts in what they kind of need or what they like, plus what they like. But then it's like, okay, if we're going to work this much with this much automation, we can make that much supply, and that has to balance with the demand side. So I think it would result in an economy where everyone's working as little as possible when it's necessary, and everything else, this is voluntary labor. So the voluntarists should love it.
And like that part is like, so like my biggest issue with that is, we all put in how much we want to work, et cetera, et cetera. We get that much resources based on. Sometimes like people, like me, for example, I fluctuate. I'll be like, some weeks I'll be like, yeah, I want to go. But some weeks I'm like, I can't do it. I just need like a break. But I still need money regardless. Like, I can't just say like, I would still need those consumption credits regardless. So, I mean, that's my mental health issues. I have really bad ADHD, anxiety, depression. You name it, I got it probably. Not you know what I mean. But
yeah. But how many of these were a result of living in capitalism?
I mean, probably most of them. But like, that's how I look at it is, sometimes people aren't going to want to.
I did put in a word about changing the plan based on like month-to-month desires.
But then like
that is something they address. They address in like in a long form way.
And that still just puts you like, okay, so this month you're not going to get as many resources, but sometimes you still need the same amount of resources. So that's why.
No, I think the point is you do, and you just either make it up later, or that's what the surplus is for.
Yeah, I guess I kind of see that. I feel like. So I don't want to hammer too much on this. I feel like at the
same time you don't want your utopian vision to have too many like circles and circles, like a Aristotelian solar system.
Right, like people who like communism and anarchism generally don't like to go to like election meetings every day in school. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, the idea is that it's not like you do the rounds once a quarter or a year, and that's it. And they're not even meetings. They're more like, Zoom call sessions or something. I don't know.
No, and that makes sense. But it's like, it's still going to require like, at the end of the day, it's still going to require a lot more bureaucracy than you really need. I feel like getting rid of the whole idea of credits and just distributing. I feel like, Okay, so this is where I'm controversial as far as anarchists go. I feel like we need a ration system, obviously based on the amount a person needs. Like if a person has 6 kids, they're going to need a little more than the person with no kids. But I feel like
it's based on a head, yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like a ration system is a lot better. Because like if someone can't go out and work for
So it's just a straight UBI.
Yeah.
And it's not really, we're not rewarding effort and sacrifice then.
Yeah, well, because the whole point is that we automate as much as possible. And like people who do have to do like necessary
We're throwing out, but you're kind of throwing out economic justice then. If you're doing a harder job but it's socially necessary.
Not necessarily. Like, so people who are doing the harder job, people who are actually doing work, which, there will be like doctors. We will never be able to just completely automate medicine as much as we try.
Well, I believe that there's really little we should automate. I mean, there's obviously repetitive, onerous work that's to be automated, but we've already done that, or we're about to. But it seems like, what's left to be automated are things that...
like, we can really automate pretty much everything. We can.
Well, I think about how, like, a lot of work we have now is created by having computers.
Yeah.
By the complexity of computers, we create more complexity that then requires more man hours and duct taper jobs and bullshit.
Like, I see that, and but that makes sense. But one of the big things too is that you have to take into account what we haven't even tried to automate yet. So we haven't tried to automate farming, and you can easily automate like most of the farming process. You get a person in a tractor, let's say, or a harvester to harvest wheat.
Well, I mean, as far as industrial farming, we have. I don't know what you mean by that. I think you're referring to the crops that still need to be
the crops, that kind of stuff. You can easily have like.
If you want to try automating strawberry harvesting, be my guest, I guess. And your reaction is actually pretty common that that's like the place where people get caught on, or it's like, I don't like this part because it's just not radical enough, is the credits, or the completely changing up. I mean, you'd think it's radical enough saying we're not going to compensate anyone based on what they own, but only on the effort they put in.
Yeah.
But I need to cut you off. We need to wrap up.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry.
So I just want to end the show. Thank you to my guest. My profound thanks for listening. Actually, so I'll close out the show. So thank you for listening. It's been a wonderful time, wonderful conversation. Thank you again to Mayhem Calling. It is his monthly podcast. Check out his YouTube channel, The Mayhem Calling. That is where you can find most, if all. Do you have any other places you are at?
Yeah, it's all there. I'm also on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Podbean, Audible. I think that's it. Yeah,
I got to see about getting on Audible. I don't think I'm on Audible.
If you have Podbean, you can go through and you can do all those. All you have to do is just like register. It's like $7 a month.
Oh God, I have to pay. That's probably why I haven't done it.
Yeah, but
same thing with. Well, I'm on Spotify, but anyway, you don't have to pay for that. Anyway, so okay, thank you very much. This has been. Anyway, have a good one. Be rad, and keep it chill.